Near the end of the period we call medieval times, the people of Europe were establishing a new pattern of living. For many centuries before, they had lived in communities which centered about the great stone castles of noblemen. The castle was the center of a community called a manor. Most of the people who lived on the manor were serfs, like the boy Otto. The serfs raised livestock and crops on the nobleman's land. They also made their own clothing. The serfs took their orders from an overseer called the seneschal, who took his orders from the nobleman. The deep moat and sturdy walls of the nobleman's castle safeguarded the serfs in time of danger. So the manor was a world in itself. But this way of life slowly changed as the people of the manor began to venture outside the walls to trade with the people of towns nearby. One morning, the seneschal instructed Otto to sell a cow to the town butcher. The seneschal would meet Otto at the shoemaker's shop at midday. Be sure to take the main road, he warned, and no daydreaming. Otto thought himself very lucky. He would have nearly a half day to spend in the town, and there would be much to see. The first sight was the town gate and walls, which were actually the town limits. Even at this early hour, people were bringing food and supplies to the townsfolk. Before anyone could pass through, he must identify himself and state his business to the town tax collector. The town had to be guarded against thieves, but this man was simply a peddler of pottery who would make a good profit selling his wares. For this privilege, there was a tax that the peddler would have to pay. The town and its people lived on trade, and most everyone who passed within its walls must pay a toll of honest money. The money collected from those selling their wares was used to support the town government. A close count was kept of the people who passed through. Almost all the necessities of daily living were brought into the town. Goods were searched to see that nothing was smuggled in to avoid paying a toll. Otto paid the toll with a coin the seneschal had given him. For like all serfs, Otto had no money of his own. As he passed through the gate, Otto was in the town square. This was the heart of the town. Townspeople gathered here to buy and sell, to barter, to gossip. Since the townspeople lived by making and trading things rather than by farming, they had to buy just about everything they used. They also bought most of the food they ate. The sausages being sold by this vendor were prepared from meat raised on nearby farms. Besides being used in trade, money also helped to support the good works of churchmen. Every town had its church, for religion was an important part of medieval life. Otto was to meet the butcher in the square and get the money for the cow. And here was the butcher right on time. He paid Otto, warning him not to lose the money. Now, could the butcher direct Otto to the shoemaker's shop? Yes, in fact, the shoemaker's apprentice, Hans, was over there at the town well. Otto could ask him the way to his master's shop. Hans, who was fetching water for his master's wife, said he'd be glad to have Otto walk with him back to the shop. Otto explained that he had money to pay for shoes for his nobleman. Drawing water was only one of the many jobs Hans did as an apprentice. He also ran errands and made deliveries. So he was very familiar with the narrow streets of the town. This was the street of the cloth weavers. The town buildings were crowded closely together. Living space was valuable, so most of the people lived on the upper floors, above their shops. This was the shop of the famous Karl the Weaver. Karl was one of the officers of the Weavers' Guild. A guild was a kind of trade association, and each member of the guild displayed a sign outside his shop which identified his craft. A picture sign, since few people were able to read. That was how you found your way through the town. You watched for the guild signs, and you knew whether you were on the street of the cloth weavers, the street of the roof makers, the street of the blacksmiths, the street of the candle makers, or the street of the shoemakers. And on this street stood the home and workshop of Hermann the shoemaker. Uh-oh, there was Johanna, Hermann's wife. Where had Hans been? Gossiping in the square? Never had she seen a lazier apprentice. Now he'd better come up before he got the beating he deserved. With Johanna so angry, it might be best for Otto to wait outside. That was all right with Otto. He had the bread and cheese he'd brought along to eat. But he certainly hoped that Hans wouldn't be beaten on his account. Now he'd wait for the seneschal to meet him here. No sooner had Hans come into the common room, which was parlor, dining room, and kitchen all in one, than Johanna told him he had missed breakfast. But if he worked hard, he might have some of the soup she was making for the midday meal. It was a rich mutton soup, flavored with plenty of spices. Many of these spices came from eastern lands. Hermann the shoemaker finished his breakfast quickly. The seneschal would be coming soon to pick up the new shoes for the nobleman. Hans was to sew on the buckles. They'd best get downstairs to the shop. When Hermann and Hans came into the shop, they found Rolf, the journeyman, already hard at work. As a journeyman, Rolf was a skilled craftsman who received wages. He was an expert shoemaker, well acquainted with the tools and materials of his craft. He could cut a leather pattern in moments and fit the parts together over a wooden form called a last to make a fine shoe. Rolf would become a master shoemaker like Hermann once he had saved enough money to open a shop of his own. Hans was good at his work, but Hermann knew the boy had a lot more to learn before he might even think of becoming a journeyman. Right now, Hans was simply an apprentice, an unpaid helper, learning a craft from a master and helping out in the master's household in exchange for room, board, and instruction. It might be 10 years before Hans ended his apprenticeship by making a master's piece that would show the guild masters all he had learned about the craft of shoemaking. They might even be shoes like these. Hermann and the other craftsmen of the guild would examine the work, and if they approved the quality, they would make Hans a journeyman. Hermann was a good master who had instructed many apprentices. But the guild must have the final say as to whether a boy was skilled enough to be called a journeyman. Ah, here was the guild warden, or inspector, who came regularly to the shop. The warden saw to it that all masters followed the guild rules. These rules set the number of hours journeymen and apprentices worked, and set high standards of workmanship and quality. Yes, Rolf's work was well up to the standards set by the guild for journeymen. The warden even checked on the quality of work done by apprentices. This matter of quality was of great importance to the guild and its members. Quality was important to men like this merchant, who sold shoes in the great marketplaces of Europe. He had to be assured of honest work and quality, or else he would take his business to craftsmen in other towns. The merchant had come to find out when he could expect several dozen slippers he had ordered. Hermann was happy to say they would be ready in a few days, long before the merchant ship was to sail. Oh, yes, things were going well in the workshop of Hermann the shoemaker. Was this another customer? No, it was a serf. Otto was still waiting for the seneschal. Hermann invited him inside. Never before had Otto seen a master's shop. And, of course, there was Hans, his new friend. Hans had finished his work with much skill. Weren't they beautiful? How soft the leather was. How handsome the buckles. Truly, these were a nobleman's shoes. Ah, the seneschal. Were the nobleman's shoes ready? They had just been finished. The seneschal was pleased. Where was the money the butcher had given Otto? Yes, it was good money, which Hermann accepted for the shoes. The nobleman was sure to like his new shoes, and the seneschal would soon return with another order. Otto hoped he might come along then to visit Hans, his new friend, at the shop of the shoemaker. And he'd also see the other workshops of the town's many guild craftsmen. And the interesting sights in the town square. Though Otto didn't know it, this town was only one of hundreds established in Europe during medieval times. Goods were produced and traded in many such towns. The towns usually grew up wherever main roads met. Wherever navigable rivers flowed. Wherever there was a natural ocean port. There were towns everywhere. In Flanders, in Germany, in France, and in England. The towns grew as trade among nations and peoples increased. Very slowly, the old way of life, which had centered about the manor, disappeared, and a new way of life based on trade and learning took root in the medieval town.